This world war inevitably means new supply routes, and one of the most important is the new Alaska Highway. It begins in the Canadian province of Alberta and runs north to Alaska, involving altogether 1,600 miles of road engineering by the United States Army. They say it'll be finished by the 1st of December, months ahead of schedule. Most of the way through the wild mountains of northern Canada, it's been tough going. Yes, it's been tough going, but of course, as you'd expect, all sorts of labor-saving mechanical devices have been put on the job. Bulldozers, levelers, and beetle crushers of all kinds. Whatever the difficulties, the great highway has gone through at a rate that's easily beaten the estimate. A direct military supply route to Alaska, a mighty new road of the utmost value to Canada, the United States, in fact to the whole offensive strategy of the United Nations. A vital supply route for the forces strengthening their bases from which to drive the Japanese back to Japan.
So today's episode is going to be a lesson for EB, a history lesson for BC and Canada. And this is by popular demand from other social media that I'm on. A lot of people weren't aware that the United States built the Alaska Highway and how beneficial it's actually been to Canada. Way more beneficial to Canada. Well, I shouldn't say that. It was at most beneficial to the world, because it stopped us from all speaking German, raising our arm at a 45-degree angle and doing nasty things to certain races and religions. But overall, within the continent between the United States and Canada, it has done amazing things for Canada. It has opened up remote areas of Northwest Canada, allowing medicine, food, and trade to a lot of the places that we probably would still not have gotten to, considering how behind and incompetent our government really is. They deal with the masses. They deal with their voting base. They don't care about 90% of Canada. We're irrelevant. The biggest threat right now isn't Trump. And we're going to get to that a little bit later, and how BC just got caught with their pants down because mainstream isn't bringing up what it is. There's a little media outlet called Canadiana. These guys are amazing. I've been following them for a couple of years. I always put all of the links in my description below. I urge you to watch these documentaries they do. They do an amazing job. And the best part, they're Canadian. And not elbows up dumb Canadian, propaganda Canadian, real Canadian. They've been doing this way before it was hip to be Canadian. You know, they're like how people where I grew up and were raised, and my friends were taught to always think of Canadian first. And when your neighbor does well, you cheer them on, because, you know, if they're doing good, then you're probably doing good, and then your community's probably doing good, and then your area, your province, and your country's probably doing good. Something that has been completely wiped off of our country in the last 25 years, and especially in the last 9.5 years. Watch carefully, listen even more carefully. And like I said, make sure that you follow these, like go to these guys, like, share, and subscribe to them, because all the support you can give to Canadian media really helps them. We're a very small nation, and we need all the help we can get, and that's from you, our subscribers. So make sure you like, share, and subscribe. And don't forget to punch that notification bell so you don't miss any future episodes. Let's begin.
This is no ordinary highway. We're in the Yukon. And this road stretches for more than 2,000 kilometers, the equivalent of the distance from Toronto to Orlando, Florida. From far on the other side of the Rocky Mountains, all the way into Alaska. It's been called one of the greatest engineering feats of modern times. But this Canadian highway wasn't built by Canadians. It was built by a foreign army at a time when what happened here in the remote Canadian North had the potential to change the course of world history. This is the Alaska Highway. This is Canadiana.
Now, please support these guys. It's really important. It is. It's really important. They, like I said, they do amazing work. This is just one of the documentaries. They've got hundreds of them. They're all fabulous.
1941, the Japanese attack Pearl Harbor, and the United States suddenly finds itself in the middle of the Second World War.
Since the unprovoked and dastardly attack by Japan, a state of war has existed between the United States and the Japanese Empire.
With Japan extending its reach across the Pacific, Alaska seems very vulnerable. The Americans desperately need to send weapons and supplies north, but it won't be easy. There are about 2,000 kilometers of Canada in the way.
We will gain the inevitable triumph, so help us God.
Thankfully, the two close allies were already working on a solution, and this little airport was part of it. They called it the Northwest Staging Route, a series of remote airfields and landing strips stretching across northern Alberta, BC, and the Yukon, letting American planes hop from one Canadian runway to another as they made the long trip north to Alaska. But it didn't take long for the sad truth to become clear. The Northwest Staging Route wasn't working. It was a long and dangerous journey. Inexperienced pilots were no match for the harrowing flight through the extreme winter weather of the north. On the first attempt, 38 planes took off for Alaska. 27 of them crashed. And that failure was felt around the world because the route to Alaska wasn't just supposed to help the US fend off Japan, it was also going to play an important role in the Allies' war against Hitler. Months earlier, the Nazis had invaded the Soviet Union, and while American planes were crashing into the mountains of the Yukon, the Germans were pushing deeper and deeper into Russia. Soviet soldiers were dying by the millions in the fight against Germany. They needed help, and they needed it fast. The Allies were already sending weapons and supplies, including hundreds of warplanes. But getting those airplanes all the way to the front lines in Russia was incredibly difficult. The long, vulnerable shipping routes were prime targets for Nazi submarines and the Japanese Air Force. It would be much more effective just to fly the planes up through the Yukon to Alaska and then straight on into Siberia. If only they could get them there without crashing. So Canada and the US teamed up on a new plan. Canada would allow the American Army to put an American highway on Canadian soil. The new road would link all the airfields together. It would allow truckloads of weapons and supplies to head north, and it would strengthen the Northwest Staging Route, making it easier to resupply and therefore easier to fly. So, this highway would allow the US to defend Alaska, while the Soviet Union would also get the help they needed in their fight against Hitler. The United States would pay for it. American soldiers would build it. And until the end of the war, when it was handed over to Canada,
So, again, I urge you to watch this entire documentary. It's really good. Now, as I stated, this really helped Canada, like hugely helped Canada. And the highways that intersected off of this that were built to other remote areas has really changed and allowed Canada to become more diverse, especially for the Indigenous people who live in such remote areas. This is a fundamental highway. It is a huge part of history that every single Canadian, especially people who live in BC, the Yukon, and Alberta, should study and learn. I only wish our government had at least a little bit, a minute amount of history knowledge in them. Those who don't know history have no right to lead us to the future. The last time the Americans gave us money for this was quite a while ago. And they're done. I think it was a year ago, 10 months ago. It's been dwindling because they call this the highway to hell, or the highway of hell, because of the shape it's in and how little the Canadian government, provincial governments, and federal government put in to maintain this road. And slowly over time and with progress, the Americans have relied more on the shipping end of it, which we're going to tie into a little bit later on how BC is cutting off that as well with this ignorant leader called EB. Listen carefully and mind the propaganda. Actually, this one's not that bad. I think I cut it right.
The government of Alaska is contributing $42 million to upgrade the Alaska Highway over 3 years. The upgrades will happen on the Yukon side of the highway between the Alaska border and Destruction Bay. That section of the highway is so bad, the Yukon's Department of Highways says it's a roller coaster-like road with cracks, potholes, and frequent gravel sections. At an announcement made today...
Now, BC got caught with their pants down because of propaganda. The biggest threat is China. And the only people who aren't going to really feel the China tariffs are to the ones who imposed it to protect their industry, which is the EV market. That, by the way, Norvolt just went bankrupt. And how many billions of our tax dollars went in to give them, you know, hey, come build in Canada. We'll support you. And then the province matched them. Oh, yeah, we're going to support. All that wasted while all these battery plants are shutting down. These guys only care about protecting the interest of those who keep them in power, which is the WEF, George Soros, Brookfield, Carney, these multi-billionaires who go and pillage and burn third world countries and use governments like ours in order to shut down our industries, which increases the value of the resources they're pillaging off of third world nations. I have a video I posted earlier where I broke a whole pile of stuff about Brookfield and how they were burning down thousands of acres of rainforest in Brazil, building dams that have no function and were of no importance, while they flooded out indigenous from their natural living grounds where they grew food and hunted without their permission or consent. This is the reality of today. This is the government we have in power. And this is why they appointed Carney. And they are trying every which way possible to get them to win an election, is to protect them and their profits on the backs of hardworking Canadians and the lives and souls of third world nations that Canadians aren't aware of. Now, back to how the media caused BC to be caught with their pants down. It was only in the last week or so that people started to get informed that their fishing industry was going to get shut down because they had no idea that China was tariffing. They're too busy passing fear, hate, and division. It's all Trump's fault. Premier Eby, if he had half a cent of brain, if he had 2 molecules of intelligence to rub together, would be screaming at the federal government. The day they announced tariffs to protect the EV industry and what it was going to do to Canada and to his province. Crickets. Now that those are imposed and they're coming into full effect, he's still not talking about it, and nor is mainstream. Fear, hate, and division. It's all about Trump. the fact that the 9.5 years of socialism is the main reason we are in the position we are today. And Canadians feel it, although the propaganda is trying to make you forget it. I'm going to let you listen to a little bit of Eby and his literal stupidity.
And there are some things that you can only get from Canada. David Eby trying to reassure the public in a town hall in Surrey about the costs to BC in a trade war, while he has threatened tolls for trucks passing through to Alaska, the U.S. threatening to strike back. Senator Dan Sullivan suggesting ships could be diverted away from BC ports, a view not shared by the state Senate Majority Leader or the senior U.S. Senator from Alaska.
Senator Lisa Murkowski and I see eye to eye on this. We are aligned. Stop this silly battle.
The trade war has continued to escalate for more than a month now. Federally, the government levying billions in countermeasures. But Canadian provinces believe they're in a position to take action as well. While the truck toll hasn't gone into effect yet, the Premier sees no other option than to keep the lever available should he need it.
Trade wars only hurt people. They don't benefit anybody. This is our message to Donald Trump. This is our message to all Americans. We don't want this fight. We didn't sign up for it, but that doesn't mean we're not going to arm ourselves.
Everything he said is verbal diarrhea. BC, all you British Columbians are going to feel the effects from what he does. The tariffs that are on right now are they hardly affect Canadians. Albeit the media would make you think that our entire country is shutting down because of it. That's not true. Your big problems are just getting started because of the ignorance of this creep.
Changing course on Alaska-bound ships more difficult than it sounds. Legislation requires all foreign-built vessels to stop at a foreign destination before traveling to another U.S. port. Senator Dan Sullivan pushing for an executive order to get the result. But the issue in the short term is logistics. The cruise schedule set 2 or 3 years
Now he's forgetting something, but I'm going to deal with that in just a second.
in advance, and Vancouver is closer to the Alaskan ports of call. The industry saving money, basing the trips from Cole Harbour.
Obviously, the cruise lines would prefer that this trade dispute be resolved soon. For the benefit of both countries and for our cruise passengers.
Both the Port of Vancouver and Victoria issuing statements Friday indicating they are watching the situation closely. Some estimates suggest every ship that docks at a BC port is worth $3 million to the local economy. With more than 300 ships arriving at both Vancouver and Victoria in 2025, the consequences to local business could be significant.
When you think about the service industry, when you think about the hospitality industry, many people rely on the cruise ship season to make their ends meet.
Yeah, we're talking billions of dollars at stake here.
Billions of dollars, thousands of jobs, short term. That's short term. They're leaving out some pretty critical information there because this is propaganda television. I'm going to move on to another clip. I've been doing a lot of research on this to build this short video to try and condense as much information as I can for, maybe hopefully one of Eby's old teachers to smack Eby over the head with the history book and put a dunce hat on him. They're already preparing for this, the cruise ship companies, and it sounds like word's going out to the larger ships as well, the ones who deal in actually hauling out all the rest of the goods from Canadian manufacturers. Listen carefully what he says. Canada has already, in their own ignorance, given the Americans the ability, without even signing an executive order, although Trump will, do you think those two Democrats that were just on there have any meaning to what Trump's going to do? He just shoves the Democrats right out of the way. He's got the largest majority in, 120 years down in the States. He has a solid mandate. And his popularity, again, if you didn't listen to our media, you would realize, is growing. Listen very carefully now, and I'll break it down for you.
This is Cruise News Today with Doug Parker.
Good morning. Here's your cruise news for Friday, March 14th. A brewing trade dispute between Alaska and British Columbia in Canada could impact the cruise industry. U.S. Senator Dan Sullivan from Alaska is pushing to waive the Jones Act, which currently requires foreign-flagged cruise ships to stop in Canada before going to Alaska or returning back to the U.S. This move follows Canada's proposal to impose tolls on U.S. commercial trucks traveling through BC. Now, if the waiver is approved, Canadian ports like Vancouver and Victoria could lose millions in cruise tourism. The Jones Act was previously suspended during the pandemic, allowing direct U.S. to U.S. cruises without having to stop in Canada.
Didn't hear that on mainstream, did ya? Once again, all hate, fear, and division in order for them to stay in power. That's the truth of it right there. It's already been done. Trump don't care about Democrats. He doesn't care about BC. He's going to hold the people who elected this goofball into power, being EB, accountable. And he will shut you down. 3,000 jobs, more than likely right off the hop, 7,000 to 10,000 within the next year, year and a half, not including all of the towns around that rely on that tourist industry will be gone, wiped off the map. And now if Trump goes full through and brings the container ships as well and starts to levy taxes on any of those ships, you can say goodbye to all of your textile and out shipping. But the biggest kicker is what the media isn't talking about. And this is where I said BC got caught with their pants down because they didn't hear about this in mainstream.
Amid ongoing trade tensions between the U.S. and Canada, BC's seafood industry is bracing for a 25% tariff next week, not from the States, but from China.
What was your first reaction Saturday morning when you got the news?
Dismay. Complete dismay.
It's a response to tariffs Canada imposed last year, 100% on all Chinese-made electric vehicles and 25% on steel and aluminum. Each year, the province exports about $300 million worth of seafood to China, our second biggest customer behind the U.S.
Now, the federal government did that to protect their investors, the WEF, Brookfield, and all the rest of these George Soros billionaires on their takeover of Canada to try and centralize their beneficiaries in our country. And by the way, Norvolt just declared bankruptcy. Yeah. They don't care about us. The Laurentian elite, the small, high densely populated area in central Canada, Ontario and Quebec, don't give a rat's ass about Canada. And the craziest part is you've got premiers like this that are too dumb to catch on because all they care about is power. Because like I said, they haven't got two brain cells to rub together. This hit them. It surprised them. I went looking and I was coming across post after hundreds of posts where they weren't even aware these tariffs were coming. And when it hit them, it was instantaneous. They didn't even have time to plan because the media and their glorious idiot leader, EB, wasn't talking about it. That's his job. He's not a federal minister. He's a premier. He's trying to put himself out there like, I'm going to be the prime minister and I'm fighting for Canada. In the meantime, he's not only screwing over Canada, he literally just threw BC under the bus. And even now, go on mainstream. How are they talking about China tariffs? Do you hear Xi Jinping getting hammered on? Are we taking all of the Chinese products off the shelves? Have we banned Amazon from selling any Chinese products? Crickets. Not a word. The epitome of stupidity, people. The epitome of stupidity. That is our government. Let's finish watching.
The market determines the price the fishermen who work on these wharves get for their catch. Any tariff or tax goes straight to their bottom line. Some industries rely almost entirely on exports to China.
95% of gooey ducks go to China. They will have to stop fishing on the 17th. Because that's the last day you could fly gooey ducks into China.
Not all seafood is that reliant on the Chinese market. Live oysters are mostly exported down the west coast of the U.S. But now, in the face of U.S. tariffs, if we want to find another customer, the Chinese market won't be it.
Even though we're not actively currently utilizing it, it's not something you just want to close the door on.
Premier David Eby says they're taking the tariffs from China as seriously as those from the U.S.
We're now in a trade war on two fronts.
He says the province is looking for new markets and has already met with the Consul General from Japan. Eby says there are plenty of countries looking for new partners in the wake of unpredictable trade policies coming out of the White House.
Lots of propaganda in that clip. The United States has brought in more business in the last month and a half than they have in the last 20 years. They have secured trillions of dollars of new investment, and in the back doors, countries are ready to renegotiate a fair trade, but not Canada, because we're in a predicament. We're using it as a ploy so that we can get Liberals reelected. It's disgusting. It's an embarrassment. I would like to hope that you all like, share, and subscribe and get the word out. And let's hope that enough people, enough British Columbians especially, like what happened to Doug Ford, because a lot of the people in Ontario, he got destroyed on social media. Destroyed. Like completely eviscerated on social media. Now the media is trying to hide that, but everywhere he went, he was getting hammered on for how dumb his policy was to cut off the power. And now Eby's going to try something like this. BC, wake up. Start writing, start emailing, start calling, and get this guy on track to do his job. His job is to be the premier of BC. You're all going to pay for it. Especially the half of BC that wanted nothing to do with this government, but lost in that election, in which we're finding out had a lot of electoral fraud in it. A lot of electoral fraud. And again, mainstream, not talking much about it. Don't forget about Canadiana. Great programs coming out of that. Like, they are really good at what they do. And again, they're Canadian. I try to push our media out there, promote Canadian, promote truth, promote fact, get the reality, educate people to what we are living in today. The only way to do it is if you like, share, and subscribe. And if you are, punch that notification bell. Not only does it help the channel, it'll help you so you don't miss out on any future episodes. Now, like I said, I did this because of thousands of people on other platforms I'm on were requesting it. They're also requesting me to do another one on Carney. It's going to be a hard one to do because there is so much information being released exposing about Carney, but I urge you to go scroll through my episodes. You'll find lots in there. There's two, one specifically that I did on Brookfield where I broke a whole bunch of information that went viral on the internet. And of course, I'm a little guy, so they don't like talking about me. They like taking credit for it. I don't care. I get a little mad, yes, but as long as the truth is getting out, that's what's important. But I would really appreciate your help making sure that my channel gets credit and that you share it to help not only me grow, but to help this entire new media grow. And who knows, maybe someday I'll be sitting in a 14x10 office in CBC. You never know, it could happen. Until next time, you guys, you've been watching the Canadian Citizen Journal, and I have been your host, alias the Guy.